So welcome back again. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and talk about a topic on an area that is changing so fast, right? And when I think about this, I do think about the impact of digital transformation, which is still high on the agenda in your organizations, I bet, right? The implications of that on cybersecurity. I think about the global situation that we'll also touch a little bit upon today, how it impacts our interactions, our digital interactions, and its impact on cybersecurity, as well as organizational practices, right? How we are changing our processes, what we're doing, the impact on digitalization on our processes, and how our behavior, our business practices changes in organizations. So thinking about these things, I wanted to have this webinar share with you what I see as the major impact points, how things have already started changing, and what I think that's going to be even more relevant in the second half of the year, let's say, and then over the next 2 years as well. Again, welcome. My name is Öyku Işık, Professor of Digital Strategy and Cybersecurity here at IMD. We had over several hundreds registrations for the webinar, and I was wondering, would it have been even the level of interest, right, the same before the pandemic? Before the pandemic, our digital discussions had already started, but we are at such a stage that it is almost inevitable, right? I jokingly say in our faces that everything is digital. Sometimes we don't have an alternative, but our interactions are digital. So clearly we are at a phase that this is our interactions with our organizations, with each other, has jumped over to the digital realm. And as much as good comes out of this, bad comes out of it as well. And that's probably not surprising to see also World Economic Forum talking about cyber attacks over the last few years, by the way, as high global risk. So the global risks report they published every year for the last 5 years or so include cyber attacks as high likelihood, high impact events, as you see here. On the image, and this year is exactly the same. Right after the pandemic, you do see cyber attacks because it does have big implications, not only on our organizations. I'm not talking about IT implications, business continuity implications. It also has implications at the society level. And just I wanted to insert this kind of face cover of the book here. I rather recently finished reading. It was a fascinating book, a brilliant investigative journalism talking about the underground vulnerability market. I highly recommend it if this is something you would find interesting. The author talks about how there is this invisible yet super lucrative market where hackers exchange the vulnerabilities, mostly zero-day vulnerabilities, say in your Microsoft product, right, that nobody else knows about, not even Microsoft, but they have figured this vulnerability out and selling to intelligence agencies because they, surveillance purposes, just in case, hoarding purposes, etc. Very interesting book that really makes you think this, things are not going really well. This is very, very pessimistic situation that is being painted. And you also see it in the news, right? I'm sure you've heard about Okta, one of the greatest authentication services that my organization uses, your organization maybe uses to authenticate and authorize users, have been breached by one of the infamous cybercriminal gangs called Lapsus. They also, just a few weeks ago, breached T-Mobile. Now, thankfully, these breaches were not as significant or successful in their term as some have feared. But at the end of the day, we started questioning their methods, right? Because why am I talking about Lapsus, one of the many groups out there? Because of the way they go about these breaches, how they convince employees to voluntarily, in exchange for financial gain, for instance, to reveal their valid credentials so that they don't really have to do much to get into the systems of the organizations. Some of them have been already caught, let's say, by law enforcement in that case in the UK. So there's a lot of movement and changes in the way these cyber criminals are also going about these things. Also, recently, it was revealed that the Chinese group called APT41 has been very aggressive with collecting intellectual property. It was revealed that as many as 30 multinational companies have suffered from, to the extent that we know, right? 30 is the number we know. These are the organizations that became aware of a breach that was specifically targeting intellectual property in the organizations. But hey, I'm an optimistic at heart. Good things are happening too. For instance, Hydra Dark Marketplace. So this is one of the marketplaces in dark web where exchanges for illegal goods or even hacking tools are taking place. Have been taken down by an international collaboration. That is also something we see, in general, attribution, so figuring out who is behind an attack and actually locating an individual or some individuals is quite challenging, quite resource and time consuming in cybersecurity. It clearly requires unprecedented international collaboration, because you also see these gangs do not necessarily are all together in one country physically, right? So we do see huge improvements in that domain as well. Some other ransomware gang members have been also here in Switzerland. There have been arrests that were the members of some of these ransomware gangs. So we do see some, let's say, catching up from that perspective, much more speedy response and identification of these individuals have been taking place as a great thing too. So with all these things happening around me, right? So as I was designing the content, I wanted to highlight these three elements. Clearly, there is technological trends that are changing the products that we use, right? Products that we use for security purposes, or products that we use that may have security implications. But then there are organizational changes that also imply different capabilities from a security perspective, as well as implications of the more large-scale changes that are out there that also imply different things from a cybersecurity practice perspective. So hence the three dots, we can find other things that are going on that clearly impact our posture, right? How we have to restart thinking from an organizational or personal cybersecurity perspective. But I wanted to talk very briefly about these 6 points that you see here on the slide. So let's start from a technology perspective and let's talk about artificial intelligence. That is also a very, very hyper word. I'm sure you've heard about this umbrella term that talks about that, this is a technology that enables the machines to mimic human intelligence, especially from a decision automation perspective, right? This is mostly what we are after. How can we automate our decisions using algorithms that learn from their mistakes as well? So ever evolving, ever improving algorithms. Now, AI as a concept may not be new, but the availability of processing capability, hardware, as well as large-scale data availability that is out there ready for using has really made the technology to be deployed so quickly over the last few years. And that is what you see on my slide here, right? AI is a tool for security. How can I use this self-learning capability, or whether it be supervised learning, unsupervised learning, deep learning? There are different ways that machines can learn. Using any of these, how can I influence and improve my security standing? Now, particularly machine learning is brilliant in pattern recognition. So when you look at those three examples that I give, fraud detection, network analysis, and user behavior simulation, these all use the pattern recognition capability. Financial systems organizations have been using fraud detection with machine learning already for quite a while. As consumers, we have all our patterns, we have our habits, purchasing habits, time, place, and shape and form and amount. So these fraud detection systems catches something out of the ordinary, right? And raises a red flag. And we now can do this at real time. So that's a brilliant advantage to most of these financial institutions. Also, the same thing, exactly the same mentality from a user behavior perspective. So suddenly, if your user starts accessing systems that she does not usually have access to, that might be a reason to raise a red flag as well. You know, what is going on, right? Or network analysis. If you suddenly start realizing data flows or packages in your network that does not seem to belong there, or that does not seem to, you know, fit with your overall traffic patterns, then that might be a reason for you to raise a flag. So there are great security solution systems that enable this capability now that is out there. But at the same time, AI does also could form a security risk. Here I want to emphasize two things. One, hacking AI, right? And two, hacking with AI. There are several examples of how our algorithms compose intellectual property for our organization. So you want to make sure that whatever, let's say, recommender system your organization using, whatever machine learning algorithm that you depend on as a competitive advantage, that you need to do your best to protect these algorithms. We also know that there are various methods to learn and mimic the behavior of an algorithm, even though you don't have access to the source code, right? So there are tools that enable anyone with bad intentions to be able to do that. And then there is hacking with AI, using AI techniques to hack into your organization. So let's also talk a little bit about that. Before I get into that, I came across to this Capgemini research that has very interesting visualization of using AI for cybersecurity, right? So the positive use of AI, let's put it that way. And I wanted to highlight this green box here, high potential use cases. This is indeed what is mostly happening these days, use of AI, mostly for fraud detection, malware detection. I wanted to just give some examples. For instance, PayPal is in that box. PayPal has been using machine learning to reduce, and they were able to reduce their fraud rate to less than 1% with using these machine learning algorithms. Honeywell is in that box. They also use their real-time sensors that feeds into machine learning algorithms that gives them the capability to intervene real time. Think of predictive maintenance here, right? Intervene real time with some of the machines if anything is going wrong. Then another ISFM, an autonomous shuttle company, is there. They are using also AI-based behavioral profiling of their machines to guard the electronic system or of their autonomous vehicle. So these are already being used. There are many use cases in several different organizations already that is out there. And also malware detection also uses in a similar way pattern recognition capabilities to observe the network to see if there's any foreign, let's say, code coming in with one of the applications. And then, as I mentioned, there is the weaponization aspect of AI. Deepfake, I'm sure you've all heard about it. It all started as fun, right? We were looking into Tom Cruise deepfakes, and then there was an actor imitating Obama in a deepfake video. But the fact that this technology is very accessible should make us think, right? What are the implications of this? Just a few weeks ago, we had the deepfake video of Zelensky roaming around the internet in an effort to demoralize, right, Ukrainians. So that was figured out that it was deepfake. But that's where the challenge lies. Sometimes it's super difficult to notice a deepfake. I had heard of a Facebook collaboration in research trying to create AI that detects a deepfake. Now, deepfake algorithms also get better in mimicking human face, human sound, our, there's hundreds and hundreds of tiny muscles in our face that even makes us, it challenges us as real human eyes detecting that this thing is machine generated, right? So this is a challenge that probably we should be expecting more research to come out on, because it is becoming, it can become a big challenge at the societal level, just even though as a technology, it's very much used in the media sector. We also know that, as you see, political implications can come out of this. So this is something we need to be aware of. Then also there are smart attacks. There are AI-powered phishing email campaigns using NLP technology, natural language processing technology, also as a subset of AI and machine learning. We know that machines can generate emails that mimic the writing style of an employee. All they would need, say, 100 emails from the same employee to figure out a writing style and mimic that, and use that to send out phishing attacks. And we have seen examples of that already. And we know that these phishing attacks, so coming with text generated by machine learning, is more effective than hacker-written, let's say, phishing attack. So this is also something we need to be aware of. That's why we say AI is a double-edged sword. AI fuzzing is the final thing that I want to mention. Fuzzing is a technique that has long existed. It's a quality assurance technique where you send to a system, an application, invalid random data to see, can I make this thing break, right? Can I, to test your code, to test your new application, how can I bring this down so that you improve its resilience? Traditionally, a very manual process done by your testers. Now you can actually use AI to automate this testing process and make it much faster, using a bigger variety of random data, invalid data to send into any technique. But using the same mentality, malware can also use the very same fast testing technique to send invalid commands to break down your system and use that as an opportunity to breach into your organization. So this is also something we do see happening. Now, that was the AI side, right? The second technology I wanted to talk about is the blockchain. But before that, I wanted to very quickly check, at least in our crowd here today, right? I have a little poll. If you do use AI or machine learning, or if you're aware in your organization, whether it be some of these techniques from increasing the protection perspective, whether it's being used or not. I would suspect fraud detection was very, very common. Pattern analysis, very, very common. Probably some of your organizations have been experimenting with this. Blockchain is pretty interesting as well. Now, for that one, I did not create a poll question, but please do write on the chat. Are there some experimentations going on in your organization with blockchain? Because it does have significant implications, right, from a security perspective by design. Please do let us know if this is something you are working on or if your organization is working on. And here I am, let me quickly share the poll results so that you also see that at least a small portion of you have already been investing in this, using machine learning for cybersecurity. I would say that is very encouraging to see, right? So it is a real trend now. But I think my perspective on AI is that we have been very much focusing on value creation with AI. So applying AI for improving security posture, I think is a very valuable initiative for organizations that value their data. If there's intellectual property or if there is, competitive advantage bringing algorithms, I think going with AI is an ultimate must for us. How about blockchain? For any organization, typically we talk about information security in at the bare minimum, 3 pillars, right? We talk about any information security initiative in the organization should focus on ensuring confidentiality of the data that needs to stay confidential, availability of the data, as well as integrity of the data. So we need to make sure that we can rely on and trust the data we have, that it has not been tampered with, right? And here by design, blockchain comes in very, very conveniently. When we say blockchain, you also have heard the basic definition. We talk about distributed ledger. We're talking about an information storage mechanism, almost like a traditional database, but not quite like, stores information in blocks. These blocks are connected to each other, and it's stored, is distributed, it's stored in different computers and systems in somebody else's computer. That also has implications from a manipulation perspective and creates an irreversible timeline of data almost of some sorts, right? So, and by design, blockchain is encrypted. So when you think of confidentiality, the design of this technology already enables confidentiality, let's say, pillar in any security initiative. Availability, the fact that your data is available through various nodes and that there is redundancy embedded when it comes to the creation of blockchain. Full copies of this data, this ledger, can always be accessed. If your computer is down, there's a copy available in somebody else's computer, again, by design. This availability is ensured. There is no single point of failure in blockchain, right? So that is the ultimate core of any redundancy that we talk about, for instance, with our organizational backups, right? Again, by design, this enables that availability capability. How about integrity? We talk about immutability, that again, if one computer is down, there's another one that is there. And if you manipulate one of the blocks in one computer, all the hundreds of the rest will basically flag that, that is the one that is not correct. So that kind of trust building behavior that is embedded by the design in this technology enables that integrity capability. Now, though, there's a new terminology with the growing number of nodes. The bigger your blockchain gets, the more also by design, if anything digital, the vulnerability increases. Now, there's a new term in cybersecurity that is called the 51% attack. 51% attack. So that implies if I manage to, as a group of black hat hackers, manage to access 51% of the devices that are part of a blockchain, and if I manage to manipulate that, then I will have the capability to overrule that trust building process on the blockchain, right? No system is 100% secure. This is the reality of the digital reality we have created, and we have seen this happening as well. There have been 51% attacks, but obviously this is much easier to pull off in smaller blockchains, right? Can you do that? Can you do a 51% attack on a Bitcoin blockchain, right? The more, the bigger the number gets, the more challenging it will get to have access to more than half of the chain. But I want to highlight some of the things you see on the slide as well, and maybe you've heard some of these things, especially the Ronin network hack that happened in November 2021 has been very, very vocal. It's a Axie Infinity player network, so play to win mentality network that has been breached. But the breach was not a 51% attack, but basically what happened is so many players surged into this network. The Ronin network had to be able to cope with the growing number of players, had to decrease their security measures to allow more flexibility into the system, to allow users to register and start playing, and then did not bring that security level back up to where it belongs, right? And this was the vulnerability that was taken advantage of by the group of hackers. And most of these this bridge problem. This is what has been also being taken advantage of. So this bridge is all about having the capability to exchange different tokens into each other, right? So these bridges have reserves. So if you want to switch, transfer some Bitcoins and go and buy Ethereum, then you have to make use of these bridges. This is the bridge between the Bitcoin blockchain and the Ethereum blockchain, for instance. And these bridges hold reserves of these coins. And there have been instances where hackers have taken advantage of the technical vulnerabilities on these bridges and to kind of basically stow away that reserve that already exists in these bridges. So as a technology, it has been indeed designed with great security capabilities by itself, but the problem here is that we cannot think of blockchain separate from the environment that this has been installed in, it has been built in, right? Be it gaming, be it smart contract exchange. So we have to think about, again, the security of the endpoint devices and the security of all the other surrounding IT systems, including employee cyber hygiene, will have an implications from a security perspective as well. And again, very much like AI, this perspective on, creating financial value, like the BBC says, crypto companies are sometimes so anxious to make loads of money or simply accommodate high demand. They put out badly designed and less tested code out there, which compromises security at the end of the day. But by design, blockchain has great promises from a security perspective. We just need to make sure that we consider the ecosystem of that blockchain, whatever it may represent, right? Not just the blockchain itself. What does this mean for you? This AI technology trend and blockchain technology trend? It means that you need to think about the security of your AI products and using AI to secure your other products as well, right? So think from the product perspective as well as how you protect your algorithms. Do you have the necessary ethical, legal, and technological standards to provide that kind of security? These are the questions I would suggest you to start from. And for the blockchain, do not separate application from its context, especially when it comes to security, and do follow up on the research as well, because that is changing very, very quickly too. So these were the technological trends. And then there's the organizational trends, right? We do know that there is a third-party risk is one of the top agenda items from a pure security perspective. And very quickly, what do I mean when I say supply chain attack? It's really about if I'm targeting as a hacker your organization, I may not necessarily go immediately after your organization, but I may go after one of your rather weak, small-scale organizational suppliers, reach into them first, and then use their valid credentials to access your network, right? We have seen several examples of this, but at the same time, we have seen as cloud service providers being breached, and as a supplier of that service, cause many other clients to be breached as well. This 2021 report also shows that it is indeed this third-party risk management you see at the bottom is basically is rated as the least adequacy of today's organizational IT setup. Most of the time, organizations, if at all, stop by level 1 supplier from a security dialogue perspective. You ask your level 1 suppliers, do you do vulnerability testing? Do you have a security training? But maybe you should consider going to level 2, level 3 suppliers as well, because we're talking about the chain of connections here. So it doesn't stop with your level 1 suppliers or partners. Just 2 examples of the supply chain attacks, right? Target years ago was breached through their air conditioning maintenance company. Just last year, Kaseya, one of the bigger IT infrastructure management software providers, was breached. And as a result, hundreds and hundreds of companies who are customers or clients of Kaseya were breached, also using a ransomware instance. So this is something we do see very, very often. And from a pure dialogue perspective, what does this mean for you is really having these conversations with your vendors as well as cloud service providers on, do they have the necessary measures in place? how are they protecting the data that is being stored as well as the one that is in transit? Do they have multi-factor authentication? Do they have security training? Do they have an incident management program in place? Just these simple questions will not only state your level of expectation, right, but also would start a nice dialogue that has implications for them as well. So clearly must be not just an IT discussion, but a part of the business discussion as you're working with your suppliers and vendors. Very relatedly, moving on to the second organizational trend, but actually talking about cloud computing and cloud service providers as a particular type of service provider, like in the supply chain example, we know that even though cloud computing as a concept has been around for quite a while now, there's a real big movement these days, especially towards switching to the cloud. And what you're seeing is Gartner's prediction for 2015 when it comes to cloudification and the total revenue of organizations that make from their cloud-based services as well as the ones making from their traditional services. More than half of the enterprise IT spending is expected to shift to cloud within a few years of time. Again, according to Gartner, and here talking about infrastructure services, software as a services, as well as system management services here. So a wide variety of different services. And when you look from a security perspective, this shift applies to business critical systems as well. So this is an Oracle KPMG recent report that talks about how more and more organizations are moving their business critical applications to be consumed as software as a service. What does this mean from a security perspective? Let me share two different survey results with you on this one. Again, on the left-hand side, the same Oracle KPMG service. On the right-hand side is a ThreatPost survey from last year that talks about how the consuming of public cloud as well as hybrid cloud and software as a service has been increasing among organizations. And the conception of, cloud is much more secure than enterprise systems has been increasing as well. We would not have this conversation, let's say 10 years ago, right? The challenge with cloud was really security. At then, people were not really trusting or willing to trust. But at the end of the day, I think, especially the dominant players like Amazon and Google, clearly showed that they do invest in the skill set, the right employees, capability building, and most of these cloud service providers have a much bigger security team with better capabilities than an average organization that is out there, right? So from that perspective, we do see that expectations are getting there, that the organizations do feel public clouds are much more secure, are somewhat more secure than these organizations can deliver. But this does not mean there are no risks, right? So if you wonder, if they are better, then what is the risk with cloud? I found this personally very interesting. I was surprised to see this. That is configuration. It's configuration error, right? Wrongly configured resource or account. And I just did a quick Googling yesterday to figure out what are the examples of breaches that has been caused by these kind of instances. Hobby Lobby in US basically was, I think it was in March 2021 that left customer information, their company's mobile app source code, as well as employee name and email addresses open to public due to misconfiguration, right? So it was a user error. Also in November 2021, this QuickFox VPN service also did a misconfiguration, and 1 million user data was leaked due to this misconfiguration of the VPN. So we can expect to see more and more of this misconfiguration going wrong stories, because again, if there's a bad intention, if you have a black hat hacker looking into these vulnerabilities, then they will know where to look, right? If this misconfiguration is a big challenge. So what does this mean for you then, if misconfiguration is a big challenge? all cloud service providers have this shared responsibility model. I'm showing you a generic one. This is an image from McAfee. But if you go, for instance, to your cloud service provider's website, they will have a different version of this, more or less the same, but there can be slight differences when it comes to who is responsible from keeping what secure, right? So you do see that if you are consuming software as a service, then the data, securing the data on the application, as well as securing the user's connection with that application, authenticating users, for instance, is your responsibility. The application itself, the operating system, your network, the infrastructure, these are the responsibility of the cloud service provider. This is how to read this shared responsibility model, and minimizing the risk from a, for instance, data security perspective is investing in encryption capabilities, again, which years ago would have been seen as an expensive investment, but now the technology is enabling that is also becoming much more cheaper and much more widely available as well. Strong security policies, audits, teaching better logging habits, as well as access management and control are some policy level, process level changes or control mechanisms you can create to minimize that risk. All right, so we have been talking about technological as well as organizational trends that may impact, but I think it's worthwhile looking out there as well, right? What is going out there that may also impact the risks that we are seeing from a security perspective as an individual as well as an organization. The one thing that I do believe will get worse before it gets better is this evolution of the cyber criminal supply chain that is out there. Hackers used to, or I have to say, black hat hackers, hacker by itself is a neutral term, right? We have to talk about black hat hackers, people who are using this for criminal purposes, have been evolving their professional capabilities significantly, all in an invisible layer. I guess years ago, they used to have more of an image problem. At the end of the day, we have this image of, at least what I keep hearing, is this, 18-year-old in the basement of his mom and dad trying to hack things away. Not really, right? We're talking about really professionally organized groups of individuals who are extremely highly skilled. Interestingly, most of them are self-taught as well, who really are focused, who have a very clear agenda and who know where to look. So, and they don't do it all, right? They collaborate. We have perpetrators. These are the ones who are, let's say, masterminds of the idea, let's say a ransomware. They pay the developers to create that ransomware. Then you have these developers. These may not be the ones negotiating with you during a ransomware negotiation, but these are the ones who create the malicious software. Then there are distributors. These are the ones that sell some of these applications to whoever wants to breach a certain organization. These are the ones that sell backdoors to other criminals who say that, we have access to this organization, but we are not the one that's going to install malware in that organization. If we just have a door, we can give that door lock to you if you want, if you want to install a malware, and then we split the ransom that is being collected from this organization. And then there is aftermath as well. If you suspect, if you ever fell victim to the ransomware, there's this dialogue between, did you ever steal our data or did you only lock it? If you stole our data, do you promise to delete this? If you ever wish to trust, right, this relationship, some hackers say we delete your data, but some of them sell it. Not immediately after, they sit on it for several months, a year, and then they sell this on dark web. And these are also your traditional cyber criminals who perpetrate, who provide access to this somebody else's personal information and can lead to identity theft and using this other person's name and address to create fake credit cards, etc. Right? So there is this whole value chain where every partner has their own role to play that creates this this significant rise in the cybercriminal supply chain that we don't necessarily see out there, but that is fast growing out there. Because, hey, unfortunately, it's a lucrative business for them right now, right? So there are many getting into this. Here, I just wanted to give the examples of the ransomware. You know, what does this mean from a chain perspective? But I already mentioned it a bit, that you do have developers and operators of ransomware. They privately offer this ransomware as a service. So they sell this to other criminals who may be interested in using this as a source of extortion from an organization. Then you have affiliates who does not even have hacking skill set. They don't even know anything about coding, or at least they don't have to, because these developers and operators create a single-click ransomware applications. So as an affiliate, all you need is to activate it in an organization, right? And then again, you do see this sharing of profit. That's what the graph you see down left, that affiliates almost receive half of the profits these ransomware gangs receive. So there's quite a lot of financial traffic going on once an organization is willing to pay the ransom in the hopes of getting their data back, right? But this is not just for ransomware. On the below right, you see that there are other services. There is a denial of service attack as a service. There's also spear phishing for hire as a service. So this is also being offered as a service that is out there. All right. Let me launch this poll because I apparently forgot to launch it. My apologies. I also wanted to ask you how many of your, or what percentage of your business critical applications are consumed as software as a service. As you saw in the cloudification related trend, we saw that more than 1/3 of the critical applications of the organizations who responded. By the way, it was more than 1,000 organizations who responded to that survey on a global scale, were willing to, or are already shifting their critical applications to be consumed as software as a service. I wonder if that number is representative for the group that is here as well. That's what I wanted to ask you. And it's pretty much a balanced distribution, I see. Let me share that some of you say more than 50%, then it means really the service level agreements you have with your cloud service providers, right? The distribution of this security responsibility model is even more critical for you, right? Creating this, they are not just a service provider, but they are a strategic partner for your organization. And then pretty much equal distribution of cloud-based services. But as I hear, this migration to cloud is one of the most time and resource consuming parts of the digital transformation initiative for most organizations today. And it's probably going to keep as such and keep increasing as well. So this rise in the criminal supply chain was the first societal trend that I wanted to highlight. And what does that mean for you, of course? I also wanted to make that clear, is that clearly that's not something any of us have direct control over, right? But I think even the fact that we are aware about this means a lot. Now, many organizations still don't invest enough in their threat intelligence collection initiatives. So we do have this false sense of security that I guess also applies to this false sense of cybersecurity. You all need threat intelligence, because we know that there's a global distribution of some of these cyber attacks. We know that your geography matters. We know that your industry matters as well, right? So there are certain attacks that are much more prominent for, let's say, banks compared to hospitals, let's say. So we do know that there are different trends. So you do need to have access to that information. So you need to know your threat intelligence, but you also need to know your vulnerabilities. Now, this was always important, but when you know that there's a growing workforce out there that's full job is to find those vulnerabilities, then I think you better take a look at your patch and upgrade management approach, right? How are you managing your critical system updates? Some of these things very easily get pushed forward, they get delayed, they get postponed, because you don't want to have your critical systems down. But at the end of the day, it will come down to your risk appetite. You have to create a moment to take care of these things, because a significant portion of the attacks, I don't have statistics on this slide for you, but we know already that a significant portion of the attacks do happen because of unpatched vulnerabilities, even though a patch is readily available, right? So we have to basically be on top of this as much as our business operating environment allows. And you need to also work on your response mechanisms. This is yet another thing that is overlooked in most organizations. How do I respond, right? So this comes down to a cybersecurity incident response plan in the organization. Maybe you don't have one. Maybe you have one that has been sitting in a drawer for a long time. Maybe you have one, but you only exercised this last year, right? So this has to be a living document, and this is one way to kind of engrave in our minds is to go through it frequently, simulate it, have tabletop exercises to really know that you know your place, you know who you're going to call, and you have scenario planning in place, right? What will I do if, let's say, I'm faced with a ransomware attack? What will I do? What do I need to do if I figure out that I'm experiencing a breach? Am I, do I have to call, let's say, if you're bound by GDPR, do I need to call now my GDPR authority? What is the threshold for me, that makes it necessity for me to call the authorities and report the data breach, etc. So preparation implies all this, so that at that moment of this unpleasant experience, that you can keep a cool head, right? That you have a plan, you have memorized it, you have practiced it, you know how to go, you don't panic at that moment, and you basically do this as quick as possible so that you get back up on your feet. This is just a suggestion. Just yesterday, the article became available. We wrote something specifically focusing on ransomware dilemma. You should be able to reach it in MIT Sloan's website that talks about what are the critical decision-making elements, specifically in the case of ransomware, right? What are the things that I need to consider even before I experience this unpleasant situation, and what are the options that I have? So I would recommend take a look at that article that will hopefully help you in your preparation mechanism as well. And the final social trend is, of course, we have to talk about what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. We know that from a purely cybersecurity perspective, there has been a fairly big activity going on already there. We know that, for instance, in 2015, when Russia invaded Crimea, there was a big electric power attack in Ukrainian grid. That put the country in dark for a while. Then in 2017, there was NotPetya, was also targeting actually Ukrainian government, but it did not stay in Ukraine, right? In 2017, NotPetya, which looked like a ransomware, but it was not a ransomware. There was really no financial gain collection mechanism behind it, did wreak havoc throughout the world. Hundreds and hundreds of companies had to deal with it. Now also there are many eyes now focused there from, again, security, from cyber digital exchange perspective. We know that there are many attacks still ongoing as well. I was just reading just 2 weeks ago in mid-April, Ukrainian energy sector, its power grid also was suffered from an industrial control systems attack, but it was thwarted, so there was no impact. So we know that there's this constant digital warfare also going on, but we have to recognize that this is the fog of war, right? There's this concept. So basically, it's super difficult to confirm or factually attribute these attacks. First of all, attribution in cybersecurity is very difficult in general, time-consuming as well. And now, due to the state of things, information takes more time to reach to, let's say, researchers. So we have to realize that if there's an attack, the question of is it Russia or is it someone who wants us to think that it is Russia is a very valid question, right? There is this uncertainty, unclarity also in the digital realm that is going on. Microsoft has issued freely available the special report just on this. I would highly recommend you quickly take a look, analyzing these attacks and see, how much can we really attribute some of these attacks that we see. But this also works the other way around. We also have seen a lot of, I guess we could call it citizen hacktivism or hacktivist groups such as Anonymous, working the other way around. It was a very interesting article talking about how hacking Russia was off limits. But now they have become the target of their own. Ukraine war made it free for all. We do have examples of several hacking groups claiming that they have leaked, they have breached Russian state media, or Russian government, Russian military, and leaking these documents and emails. So again, maybe not something you have direct control over, right? But if we have to find a positive spin on this, I think my perspective is that maybe this is a good moment to increase the amount of cybersecurity discussions in the organization, saying that, hey, we need to be more alert, educate our users about increased risk, we need to update our systems, push on that vulnerability and patch management system that you're working on, right? So maybe this is a good moment to push forward that these are now critical things that we need to do. There's some urgency to this now. And of course, another focus on backups and updating your systems is definitely one thing you can do to minimize a potential challenge that is out there. With that being said, I have two other questions for you. So my first question is, has your organization been subject to a successful cyber attack during the past 2 years, right? So let's put a time frame to it. I debated, should I put not sure as an option or not? Because I know that it is a reality. Maybe you have been breached, but you're just not yet aware of. Unfortunately, that is possible. IBM had a report suggesting that the average number of days is 200 when it comes to an organization becoming aware of a breach. So over the last 2 years, where we did see a huge surge of attacks, I wonder if your organization has been subject to, right? So I'm talking about many of our organizations are constant attack, DDoS attacks, attacks that are not necessarily implying breach. So I'm asking about successful attacks that resulted with a breach. That's what I'm really curious to hear, to see if you know of it, or if you know for a fact whether you have been subject to this or not. Now I'm seeing a question here, maybe quickly, how to assess threat intelligence vis-a-vis modern international political cyber warfare. That's why I also mentioned the report by Microsoft, because that comes very close to that. And majority of the threat intelligence reports do include implications of whatever geopolitically happening as well, because they are always triggers of certain events, right? That also applies to these attacks as well. So major research organizations such as Microsoft, for instance, or McAfee, in that case, or there are several out there that provide some of these free intelligence reports too, for you to just keep track of what is going on out there. And my final poll question to you is, so we talked about six things, right? So which one do you think is the most influential trend that is out there? Which of the trends we discussed is going to be the most influential in the second half of this year, let's say in the next 6 months? Which one do you think, maybe just overall or from specifically your organization's perspective, that you see that we need to have some priority over here? Do you offer courses on cybersecurity? There is an online program, a cybersecurity strategy and risk. It's not face-to-face, fully online, and there are several editions in a year that you can take a look at. Then do you think that it would be better to go back to on-premise versus cloud to minimize the risk of unwanted cyber attack? Or would it be worse, meaning on-premise technology will be more prone to cyber attack? Thank you for the question. This is so interesting because, you know, in enterprise IT, there is this pendulum of centralization and decentralization. And it is a question with no answer, right? Because it does depend on the organizational context, which one is going to work better for you. But that pendulum is there, that we do see organizations becoming more prone to decentralization. And when they suffer the negative implications, they go towards centralization as well. So it's an ongoing war to be for lack of a better word. But I think cloud is very similar in that sense. But I think overall, if I have to pick, I think the advantages provided by cloud are immense, right? So we also have private cloud. So no cloud does not necessarily mean on-premise IT. I do believe that on-premise is not necessarily more secure than cloud. I do also essentially believe the capability development capacity of cloud service providers is significantly higher than any of our organizations can afford to pay resources for, right? So I do believe leaving cloud is not necessarily would be the best option. And let me quickly share the poll results here so that you also see. It seems that slight majority of you think that cybercriminal supply chain has maybe more serious implications or more pressing than the other ones. I guess I would tend to agree to that, simply due to the fact that it's invisible behind the curtain, behind lines, right? And it's not something we can directly control over. I guess it's a matter of how do I optimize what I do so that I am best prepared that I ever can be for these things, right? That's why we talk about the shift from cybersecurity to digital resilience, coming grips with the fact that this is almost half of you said, well, it's either I don't know or it didn't happen, we did not experience a breach. It's very likely that you will, right? And the scale might not be as significant as the Target breach or the Kaseya breach, but as an organization coming grips with this fact that, okay, we will experience this, what we need to focus on is to improve our response capability, because reputational damage does not come from being subject to cyber attack. Reputational breach comes from not responding well to that cyber attack. Some organizations today just blatantly lie about the breaches they have. They said, oh no, it's server maintenance. No, it was this or that. So many examples. Check out the TravelX case. Check out the Equifax breach. So it's really how you communicate to your stakeholders, to your consumers, is what makes or breaks, I think, from a reputational perspective. Another question on cybersecurity and user experience can have conflicting priorities. Yes. How do you find that large companies organize themselves? Yes, this is a brilliant question. Thank you, Jean. I am aware of several startups focusing on this, right? So how do I take the pain of authentication away? Here at AMD, we use single sign-on, right? There's always a big question. Is this really always the best option to have? Should we separate what is available for single sign-on versus not? So always this user experience is definitely a factor. It's a tension in cybersecurity. That is why AI and automation of cybersecurity is something I look forward to becoming much more widespread, right? Much more available. Taking that pain of authentication using different approaches is definitely will be one factor improving. And I think there is no clear or great choice when it comes to that. Most organizations, think about financial services organizations, that we cannot even use flash drives, right? So there is a big implication for user experience. It's a very clear separation of, this is the decision, this is the priority. For us, security has more priority, so this is the way to go. So I guess it's about those making those choices for the time being, and depending on what you are securing. That's why we also hear more talk about zero trust architecture that really says, we have to really make sure that we segment our network and where we keep our data. Not every data is created equal. Some are more sensitive than the others. We need to authenticate and re-authenticate for anyone who's trying to switch from one system to the other, which also has implications for user security. But which parts of these things that I can automate to basically minimize that negative implications from that perspective? I think this is a very valid question that almost every organization is dealing with today. And finally, I wanted to kind of end up with a summary slide of all the things. What can you ask out of these things to your, for instance, security director or chief information security officer? Are you investing in AI, blockchain? Then I guess that's a great point to start from. Are we doing extra security assessments for these technologies? Doesn't have to be those two, right? Any new tool that you're bringing in, you have to have a specific focus on its implications in general, how digital transformation is changing your threat landscape. Are you adjusting and readjusting your appetite? Because every organization has a different risk-taking behavior, right? But being aware of this and being at peace with which risks you are willing to take and which are not is a great awareness possibility. So do think about your risk appetite for these things. Talk to your vendors, ask their security practices, and check out the shared responsibility model of your cloud service provider, right? Do you know what is your responsibility and what is not? Make sure that there is no room for confusion in that relationship. And of course, go back and think about how you train your people. Cybersecurity awareness, cyber hygiene. We are all tired of this, hearing this, I know, but it's still the number one cause of the breaches because we are at the outermost layer of our organizational network. So our awareness, our good practices is the most effective defense mechanism, right? We always keep hearing, our users is the weakest link, but we are also the most important defense layer when it comes to ensuring security in the organization. And make sure that this is part of your business continuity discussion, right? Business continuity planning. Have a focus on that incident response plan. It's going to be more and more critical. Do make sure that you update it, you exercise it, be as detailed prepared as possible. Create scenarios, right? What we do if it's ransomware? What do we do if it's something else? So be prepared for different scenarios that is out there. Thank you very much. I see that we're a few minutes over time already. Thank you for the brilliant questions. Thank you for your interaction. I do hope this was interesting and wishing you all the best and secure digital interactions as well. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. Bye-bye.